Before we begin, take a moment to settle into a comfortable position, just becoming a little bit more relaxed than you already are. As the violin sound begins, allow yourself to simply receive it. Listen not only to the sound, but also to the space between the notes. Rest in the pause between phrases, letting both music and silence merge into one experience. Please enjoy this violin sound meditation.
Hi there. Welcome to another presentation of the Globe Sound Healing Conference. Now we have Natalie Brown. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, thanks, David.
Welcome, welcome. So Natalie is a composer, educator, sound healing practitioner, and multi-instrumentalist. She has traveled the world performing, recording, and teaching music. She was trained classically starting violin at age 4 and taught high school orchestra for 14 years. She's the founder and operator of Sounds Heal Studio, providing one-on-one and group sound healing sessions and workshops, as well as practitioner training through the International Sound Healing Academy. She completed Nada Yoga, uh, Yoga of Sound teacher training in Rishikesh, India. She also has training and certifications in Reiki, craniosacral therapy, Qigong, acupressure, Celtic shamanism, and is an advanced level certified bio-well practitioner. Natalie's podcast, Sounds Heal Podcast, explores using sound for health and wellness with interviews of top innovators and practitioners in the field. It has been recognized as the #1 music therapy, sound therapy podcast across all major podcast platforms. Natalie's goal is to share the benefits of sound healing and help others use sound for self-care, personal growth, and to heal. What have you been up to lately?
Oh gosh, all kinds of things. Making music, appreciating nature, teaching a lot of exciting things happening. I mean, I'm sure everybody that's a part of this conference realizes what a pivotal time we're in this field. So just a lot of things going on, a lot of adventures going on. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, here's the big question. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do to help people on the planet?
It's a huge question, and it's a big world, isn't it? It's a big question. Um, what I think people need more than anything is hope, right? It's hope. What makes people happy is actually different for each person. So I would want to create hopeful situations, environments, whether it's a nature preserve, um, or community centers, sanctuaries that people can enjoy. I mean, but my other thought is food and shelter
Mhm.
might be
Oh,
might be a
big.
priority. So it's a huge question. Um, in my experience, especially involved in this work, is what gives that sparkle in somebody's eye? What is that hope? What is that spark? So, with how many people there are on this planet, um, it would be hard to discover exactly what that is for each person. But I think the work we're already doing, using sound for health and wellness, is a key part of that. Um, so I don't have the exact answer, but I would just keep doing what I'm doing, maybe on a larger scale.
Cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about what your presentation's about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was really thinking about this, and it was really so revealing and fun to put together, and just to give a brief overview. As a classically trained musician, as a violinist, I was really thinking about just that training, that those foundations I received, and kind of bringing it into sound healing. It's great to have foundations, trainings, and understandings. And then as a violinist, I realized I had a natural ability to just make things up, right? And just be really intuitive and improvise and listen. And to bring that to sound healing, again, it's really great to have a foundation, but sometimes we can get stuck on the tones, the frequencies, a protocol. And eventually we need to lean into just letting go of all of that and just trusting. And I think a big part that can go unnoticed in this work is the pause, the rest, silence, stillness, and how to embrace that, and actually how that could be really the key to integration and transformation. And one other aspect of that, when I was a high school teacher, and extremely stressed out and exhausted, the first modality I went into was Tai Chi. And I remember those first classes, how I had no patience for the slow movements. I was just, I was such in this multitasking state in my life that those slow movements, I was like, come on, I just want to get to the next thing. But eventually, how powerful. I mean, I was eventually, once I embraced the slowness, and I felt really this buzzing energy. So, again, translating that to sound healing, if we can be more like Tai Chi practitioners and slow motion and embracing the stillness, the subtleties, the more sensitive we can become to our clients and hopefully help them embrace the moments of rest and stillness that I think we need more than ever. So that's the idea. The presentation is about sound and silence, the art of listening. And so we look at it through science and physics, acoustic ecology and nature, and global perspectives on the pause. And then how do we integrate those things into our work?
Excellent.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Let's check it out.
All right.
Okay. See you on the other side.
Thank you for being here. We're going to explore something that can go unnoticed, the space between sound. We tend to focus on the tones, the instruments, even melodies. But what about the pauses, the stillness? What if silence is just as essential to sound as the notes themselves? Throughout this session, we'll be exploring the dynamic relationship between sound and silence, not as opposites, but as partners in deep listening and healing. We'll look at this interplay through multiple lenses: science, nature, and acoustic ecology, music, meditation, Nata yoga, and other global traditions. This session will unfold in 4 key themes: the science of sound, silence, and deep listening, how vibration, resonance, and stillness affect the body and nervous system, acoustic ecology and nature's rhythms, how the natural world teaches us about cycles of sound and silence, global perspectives on the pause, how different cultures and traditions have long honored silence in healing and meditation, and integrating deep listening, how we can bring these principles into sound healing and our daily lives. As we begin, I invite you to notice the spaces between. Notice what happens in the moments of stillness, between your breath, between my words, between sounds. And as we move through this presentation, I invite you to ask yourself, what happens in the pause? What do we hear when we truly listen? Let's begin with a little sound. I will strike a Himalayan bowl, and I invite you to follow the sound from the moment it begins until it fades completely. Stay with the sound and with the stillness that follows. So let's take a deep inhale, appreciating the moment before the sound. And then exhale, grounding ourselves in the present. And a nice deep inhale. And bringing yourself back with a relaxing, releasing exhale. So let's begin. We often think of sound as the active force in healing. The vibrations of a singing bowl, the deep resonance of a gong, or the soothing tones of a violin. But what if the true power of sound comes not just from what we hear, but what happens in the spaces between? What if healing lies in the pause, in the stillness, in the way sound emerges and dissolves into silence? In this first section, we'll explore the science behind sound and stillness, how they shape our brain, our body, and our perception of the world. Have you ever noticed how certain sounds can instantly shift your state of mind? The steady rhythm of a drum can feel grounding. The soft melody of a cello can bring comfort. And a sudden loud noise can make you tense. This is because sound has a direct impact on our brainwave activity. Brainwave entrainment is the process by which external rhythms influence our brain's electrical patterns. So when we listen to rhythmic drumming, singing bowls, or binaural beats, our brainwaves begin to synchronize with the frequency of the sound. Slower frequencies are associated with deep relaxation, creativity, and meditative states, exactly the states that sound healing aims to induce. In 1973, Dr. Gerald Oster discovered how binaural beats, two slightly different frequencies played in each ear, can shift brainwave states, leading to profound relaxation. And Dr. Daniel Levitin, a neuroscientist and author of This Is Your Brain on Music, found that music affects the default mode network of the brain, influencing emotions, memory, and stress regulation. So this is why a steady, low frequency tone, like a gong, a deep singing bowl, a repetitive drum beat, can slow brain activity and bring someone into a meditative state. The brain follows the rhythm, shifting from active beta waves into alpha, theta, or even delta states of deep healing. If sound can change the brain, what about silence? In 2013, Imke Kirst conducted a study published in Brain Structure and Function that found something remarkable. 2 hours of silence per day led to the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for learning and memory. Interestingly, silence was more effective in promoting brain cell regeneration than music or white noise. So, why? Silence allows the nervous system to shift from stress, so the sympathetic nervous system, to deep relaxation and repair, parasympathetic. When we are constantly bombarded by noise, our stress response remains activated, keeping us in a state of alertness. Moments of silence reset the auditory system, improving focus, perception, and emotional regulation. This is why the pause after a sound is just as important as the sound itself. In a sound bath, when a sound fades into silence, that moment of stillness is when we begin to process and integrate the experience. Sound doesn't just influence brain waves, it directly affects our emotions as well. Dr. Stefan Kolesh, a neuroscientist specializing in music and emotion, found that sound activates the limbic system, the brain's emotional processing center, and low frequency sounds like deep gongs or bass notes induce feelings of calm and grounding, where high pitched, sharp, or discordant sounds trigger alertness or even discomfort. This might explain why certain tones in sound healing feel deeply soothing, while others can bring up emotional release. Sound is not just something we hear, it's something we feel at a visceral level. So going even deeper into the physics of sound itself, what is sound made of? What happens in the spaces where vibration seems to pause? And how does this relate to the fundamental fabric of existence? So in this section, we'll explore two key concepts: nodes. These are points of stillness in a wave and how they shape resonance. Zero point. What exists before sound and its connection to Nada yoga and the nature of reality. If you've ever played a stringed instrument, you've seen how a vibrating string moves in waves. But not every part of the string moves. Some points remain completely still. These are called nodes. A node is a point of no vibration in a standing wave. In contrast, antinodes are points of maximum vibration. Nodes naturally form because of interference patterns where sound waves either amplify or cancel each other out. So imagine plucking a guitar string. The string moves up and down, but certain points remain fixed. Those are the nodes. These still points don't mean there is no energy. Rather, they represent equilibrium, where movement resolves into stillness. And nodes are not just a curiosity of physics. They help us understand how stillness and motion coexist within vibration. They can reveal how sound organizes into patterns, something we can actually see through a field called cymatics. And cymatics is the study of how sound vibrations create patterns in physical materials, allowing us to see how nodes and antinodes emerge in real time. One of the most famous cymatic experiments was conducted in the late 1700s by Ernst Chladni, a German physicist and musician. He took a metal plate, sprinkled it with fine sand, and ran a violin bow along the edge. So what happened? The sand moved into distinct symmetrical patterns, beautiful geometric forms appearing right before our eyes. So the sand settled into the nodes, the points of stillness where no vibration was occurring. The empty spaces between the patterns represented the antinodes, where the vibration was the strongest. This revealed that sound has a natural organizing effect. It doesn't move randomly, but follows universal harmonic structures. Just as sound on a Chladni plate creates resonant patterns and still points in the medium, could it be that sound healing instruments such as gongs, singing bowls, and tuning forks produce resonant frequencies that create vibrational responses in the body, supporting balance and well-being? It's something to consider. The still points within these vibrations act as nodes of integration and healing, much like the stillness within a standing wave. So what about the space before vibration begins? 0 point refers to the underlying stillness that exists before all motion. In quantum physics, the 0 point field represents the baseline energy that exists even in a vacuum, where no particles or waves should exist, yet energy still fluctuates. Physicists have discovered that even in complete emptiness, energy never fully disappears. There is always an underlying hum of activity. This aligns with the idea that vibration is fundamental to existence, even beyond our perception. In other words, even in silence, something is always present. There is no true nothingness, only the space where potential exists before it takes form. This philosophy is fundamental to Nada yoga, as well as many other perspectives across the globe, which we'll get into in just a bit. In sound healing, in music, and in nature, we see a pattern. Moments of stillness are just as essential as movement. The pause between heartbeats, the stillness after an exhale, the quiet that follows a tone. These are not empty spaces, they are spaces where the body integrates, resets, and heals. One of the key players in this process is the vagus nerve, the most influential nerve in the body's relaxation system. This nerve is not just a conduit for healing, it is deeply attuned to the rhythms of sound and the spaces between them. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve, running from the brainstem down through the throat, lungs, heart, diaphragm, and digestive system. It's the main component of the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for the body's ability to shift from stress into rest, from doing into being. The vagus nerve's role in the healing response is that it regulates breath, heart rate, and digestion, governs the parasympathetic nervous system, counteracting stress, affects inflammation levels, immune function, and emotional regulation, responds not just to sound, but to the pauses between sound, where the body fully releases tension. Think of a pendulum swinging. It needs a moment at the top, a still point, before it changes direction. The body functions the same way. The vagus nerve allows for this moment of stillness between activation and relaxation. It can be easy to think that healing happens when we are actively doing something, listening, playing an instrument, chanting. But what if it's actually the pause between sounds that allows for the deepest healing? When sound fades into silence, the vagus nerve engages the deepest relaxation response. Constant input keeps the nervous system in a state of mild activation, but the stillness after sound signals the body to fully let go. This is why long exhales, the decay of a singing bowl, the moment after a chant feel so deeply restorative. They allow the vagus nerve to complete the cycle of release. In music, a pause is not just the absence of sound, it is an intentional moment that shapes what comes next. The same is true in the body. Silence is not passive, it is an active state of healing where the vagus nerve guides the body into deeper regulation. Beyond relaxation, the vagus nerve plays a direct role in heart health, digestion, inflammation reduction, and trauma recovery. And these healing processes are enhanced when we allow space for stillness. Heart rate variability, HRV, measures the flexibility of the heart's rhythm. A high HRV means the heart is adapting well to relaxation and stress. A low HRV means the body is in chronic stress and unable to shift easily into recovery mode. Pauses between breath, between sound, between heartbeats increase HRV. The vagus nerve regulates this rhythmic balance, and stillness allows it to recalibrate. If you've ever felt a sudden deep calm after a long exhale, that's your vagus nerve adjusting HRV in real time. The vagus nerve is also deeply intertwined with gut health and the immune system. In fact, 80% of the vagus nerve's fibers run from the gut to the brain, measuring that our digestion is directly connected to our nervous system's ability to rest. Silence after deep exhalation stimulates digestion by signaling the body that it is safe to process food. Periods of stillness reduce inflammatory markers in the body, aiding recovery from chronic stress and illness. Longer pauses in breath and sound balance vagal tone, allowing the body to settle into a deep healing state. When we allow space for stillness, whether in meditation, sound healing, or simply sitting in nature, the vagus nerve sends signals to the gut and immune system that it is time to repair. Stillness can feel deeply restorative, but for some, it can also feel unsettling. This is because the vagus nerve is directly tied to trauma processing and emotional regulation. Trauma survivors often remain in a state of heightened alertness, unable to fully relax. Stillness and silence can be powerful, but must be introduced gently so the vagus nerve can recalibrate without overstimulation. Therapeutic approaches use intentional pauses to allow emotions and energy to settle safely. The vagus nerve helps us find the balance between activation and rest. Just as music needs a pause to create rhythm, the body needs stillness to fully process and integrate experiences. If we return to the original question, what happens in the space between sounds? We find that this is where deep listening, healing, and integration occur. This pattern isn't just found in our bodies. Nature itself moves in cycles of sound and silence, presence and pause, the stillness between ocean waves, the breath-like rhythm of wind, the quiet spaces that shape birdsong. All of these reflect the way sound and silence interact as a natural force. The vagus nerve teaches us that the body thrives in rhythms of activation and stillness. But nature has been showing us the same wisdom all along. When we listen to the world around us, we start to hear patterns of sound and pause woven into the landscape itself. In this next section, we'll explore how acoustic ecology, nature's rhythms, reveal deeper truths about sound, silence, and the art of deep listening. Again, some of the deepest wisdom about sound and silence doesn't come from human creations, it comes from nature. The natural world has always been our greatest teacher in understanding rhythm, resonance, and the balance between sound and stillness. To understand the rhythm of sound and silence, we don't have to look any further than nature. Acoustic ecologists like Gordon Hempton have studied some of the quietest places on Earth, searching for true silence. But what they discovered is something fascinating. True silence does not exist. Instead of absence, silence in nature is filled with micro sounds, the movement of wind through trees, distant bird calls, the subtle hum of the earth itself. Silence is not the lack of sound. It is a state of deep listening where we become attuned to the finest details of our environment. So, how does nature demonstrate this balance between sound and stillness? Let's look at a few examples. Birdsong, the silence between the notes. Birds do not sing continuously, they leave space between their calls, allowing others to respond. This natural rhythm enhances communication. Too much noise would make it impossible for them to hear one another. So in sound healing, this mirrors how we use intentional pauses to allow for integration and awareness. The ocean follows a rhythmic cycle. A wave rises, crashes, and then fades into stillness before the next begins. This is the same natural rise and fall found in breathwork, meditation, and sound healing sessions. By recognizing these natural rhythms, we can align our sound practices with the body's natural flow of energy. Wind moves in gusts and pauses, just like the breath in meditation. In ancient times, the movement of wind through caves, trees, and canyons was used as a form of natural music, an early form of acoustic awareness. When we play instruments like the flute, singing bowls, or even the voice, we mirror the way wind interacts with the world around us. So, how do we train ourselves to perceive these rhythms of sound and silence in a deeper way? This brings us to the concept of deep listening, pioneered by composer and sound artist Pauline Oliveros. Oliveros coined the term deep listening, which is more than just hearing. It's a practice of expanding our perception to include all layers of sound. Some listening exercises are shifting awareness from foreground sounds, so voices, instruments, to background sounds, the breath, sounds in the distance, vibrations, noticing the silence between tones, how it holds the resonance of what came before it, and allowing awareness to extend beyond just sound. What does the stillness feel like? In sound healing, this kind of listening is essential. It's not just about what's being played, it's about what's not being played. The silence is part of the music. So, passive hearing versus active listening. There is a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is automatic, but listening is a choice. Hearing is the passive reception of sound. It happens whether we focus or not. Listening requires attention, presence, and awareness. Training the ear to notice subtleties, changes in pitch, resonance, and decay, enhance mindfulness, deepens meditation, and brings us into the present moment. Nature doesn't just teach us about sound, it teaches us about the necessity of pause. Just as animals rely on silence for survival, humans rely on stillness for integration, calm, and healing. Sound in nature follows rhythmic cycles. Birds sing at dawn, but midday is pretty quiet. Nocturnal animals emerge at night, but silence reigns at dusk. Indigenous cultures studied these natural acoustics and used them to develop musical scales and healing sounds. At Orfield Laboratories anechoic chamber, there is virtually no sound. So quiet that people can hear their own blood flow. But true silence is not found in man-made chambers. It's found in the deep forests, the open deserts, and the stillness of nature. This reminds us that silence is not unnatural. It is the foundation of deep listening and awareness. So, applying these lessons in sound healing, you can tune into nature for ideas, listening to the space in between raindrops, the pause in between thunder and lightning, the call and response from birds, the ebb and flow of a calm breeze. And many instruments used in sound healing and soundscapes are meant to evoke the sounds of nature, like an ocean drum, a rain stick, the waterfall shell chime, or a chacapa leaf rattle. That actually can evoke the sounds of wind or even the sounds of wings, feathers. Even a handpan or a kalimba can sound a bit like raindrops. Nature teaches us that sound and silence coexist as part of a greater rhythm. In sound healing sessions, we can integrate this by encouraging clients to listen to silence as deeply as they listen to sound. We can create soundscapes that mirror natural patterns, Instead of playing sounds continuously, allow for rises, falls, and moments of stillness. And using the pause as a way to deepen awareness and transformation. So, when we think about sound healing, we must also think about silence, not as an absence of sound, but as a necessary counterpart to it. The interplay between sound and silence is what makes healing, transformation, and deep listening possible. The natural world has always understood this. In honoring these natural cycles, we return to a more balanced way of being, one that allows space for stillness, awareness, and deep connection. In the next section, we'll look at how different cultures and traditions have understood and honored the power of the pause, from Nada yoga to indigenous drumming and beyond. Across cultures and spiritual traditions, silence has been revered as a gateway to deeper awareness, transformation, and healing. Whether in music, meditation, or movement, many traditions recognize that what happens in the space between sounds is just as important as the sound itself. Let's begin with Nada yoga, the yoga of sound. Nada yoga has its origins in ancient Indian traditions, and it dates back to the Rig Veda, which is 35 centuries old. But of course, the Rig Veda was composed orally for centuries before it was ever written down. In it, we find the Nada Bindu Upanishad, and it teaches meditation on the nada, the inner sacred sound. Much of that text was later incorporated into the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Nad is a Sanskrit word which means to sound, thunder, roar, howl, or cry. Adding an A makes it nada, which means sound or tone. It also means river or stream. If we put these different meanings together, stream into sound, we have the object of meditation and Nada yoga, the sound stream. In this practice, philosophy, and way of life of Nad or Nada yoga, sound is seen as a path to the divine, and silence is where true awareness emerges. Nada yoga recognizes two types of sound: ahat or ahata nada, struck sound. This is any two objects struck together. The external vibrations we create, heard through our senses, chanting, singing bowls, drumming. It can be nature sounds like thunder, rain, ocean waves. It can be human-made sounds such as clapping, footsteps, a door closing. And the other type of sound is anahata nada, unstruck sound, the inner sound, a vibration beyond physical perception, heard in deep meditation. Internal vibrations experienced in spiritual states. It's a subtle, non-physical sound beyond our sensory perception, often described as a hum, a ringing, almost sounding like the buzzing of bees, or cosmic sound, representing a connection to the divine or universal energy. The vibration, the om, the cosmic hum that is always there. This sound is not created externally, but felt within during heightened states of awareness. Anahata nada, the cosmic hum, can be seen as a direct experience of the 0 point, a subtle, unmanifested vibration that represents the underlying unity and infinite potential of the universe. In Nada yoga, practitioners listen deeply for this unstruck sound, a vibrational stillness that exists within us at all times. This is receptive Nada yoga. And the practice of chanting, making external sounds, that's active Nada yoga. And active Nada yoga is not just about creating sounds, but about what happens after the sound dissolves. The silence holds the resonance, allowing the energy to integrate. In Indian classical music, especially with the concept of raga, the spaces between the notes are essential. The silence between the phrases allows for the emotion of the raga to emerge, creating a profound impact on the listener. The structure of Indian classical music often involves improvisation, where the musician plays with the silence and the sound, allowing music to flow in a natural and unforced way. The silence is often described as a space that holds the sound, giving it context and depth. In Hinduism, Nada Brahma, the sound of the divine, expresses the belief that the universe is made of sound, with silence as the space where the divine is most deeply felt. In Indian classical music and Nada yoga, sound and silence are tools to connect with the divine, seeing all existence as vibration. In Japanese culture, there is a deep reverence for space and emptiness, expressed through the concept of ma, a word that means the interval, the gap, the pause between things. Unlike in Western traditions where silence is often seen as a lack of something, Ma recognizes that space gives meaning to what surrounds it. Zen gardens use empty spaces to create balance and harmony. Haiku poetry relies on the pause between phrases to evoke deeper meaning. The shakuhachi flute is played with an emphasis on the breath between notes, rather than just the notes themselves. Japanese aesthetics recognize that without space, there is no form. In music without silence, there's no rhythm. Without stillness, there is no movement. And this reminds us that the pause is not empty, it's alive. When we hold silence after singing a bowl, striking a gong, we aren't stopping the sound, we are letting it breathe. In a session, we can use intentional pauses to amplify awareness and deepen resonance. Sound is not just about what we hear, it's about how we hold space for what arises in the silence. In Tibetan Buddhist practices, sound and silence are deeply intertwined. Chanting mantras, such as Om Mani Padme Hum, creates vibrations that are believed to purify the mind and body. The silence between chants is just as powerful, giving practitioners space to receive the energy and clarity from the sound. Additionally, Tibetan and Himalayan singing bowls and bells are used to induce meditative states, with the reverberating tones gradually fading into silence, allowing for deep introspection and healing. In Tibetan Buddhism, silence during meditation retreats is often practiced as a way to keep the mind and bring awareness to the present moment. This noble silence allows participants to detach from distractions, deepen their inner listening, and connect with their true nature. In Taoist practices like Qigong, sound and breath cultivate the flow of vital energy, qi. Qi sound meditations are paired with intentional pauses, allowing the practitioner to align with natural rhythms. In Chinese medicine, stillness and silence are essential for restoring balance, allowing energy to flow freely. The Taoist concept of yin and yang reflects the harmony of opposites, sound and silence, action and stillness. Just as yin and yang rely on each other, silence serves as the receptive counterpart to sound's expressive quality, creating a balanced, healing environment. In Sufism, especially within the practice of whirling dervishes, the act of spinning symbolizes the cosmic dance of the universe. While sound, through chanting and music, plays an important role in spiritual practice, The pause, stillness, and internal silence during the whirling experience holds the key to transcendent states of awareness. The silence between the spins is seen as a moment of connection with the divine, where inner peace and clarity arise. Sama refers to the Sufi practice of listening to music or poetry as a means of achieving spiritual ecstasy. Silence between the sounds allows the listener to fully absorb the vibrations and the sacred messages carried by the sound, leading to an expanded sense of consciousness and connection with the divine. Moving into ancient Greek philosophy and music, Pythagoras explored the connection between sound and healing, believing the universe was built on mathematical ratios. He saw harmonic vibrations as a means to influence well-being, with Pythagorean tuning creating balance between tension and release, much like stillness and resonance in sound healing. Silence and pauses were essential for harmony in body and mind. Ancient Greek philosophers also envisioned the music of the spheres, where planetary vibrations formed cosmic harmony. The silence between these sounds was equally powerful, representing the stillness that allows music and balance to exist. In many Native American traditions, the drum is seen as a sacred tool for healing. In rituals and ceremonies, the drum beat often represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth, and the silence between beats allows participants to connect with the rhythm of nature. The pause between drum strikes or chanting is often just as important as the sound itself, creating that space for deep reflection, release, and connection to the spiritual realm. Indigenous cultures use silence as a central part of their vision quests. Participants go on a solitary journey into nature where silence, stillness, and solitude allow for self-discovery, inner reflection, and spiritual awakening. Silence is seen as a potent vessel for receiving spiritual guidance. When using drumming in a sound healing session, we can slow the rhythm and introduce pauses to help the nervous system integrate the sound. A steady beat can be activating, but the space between beats allows for grounding and reflection. This mirrors how in life moments of stillness allow for transformation to take place. Silence is one of the most powerful yet overlooked forces in music, spirituality, and healing. In a world filled with constant noise, we often think of silence as an absence, an empty space. But in reality, silence is alive. It holds presence, energy, and meaning. Throughout history, musicians and mystics alike have recognized that sound alone does not create meaning. Silence does. The pause, the space between notes, the quiet before something begins. This is what gives sound its depth and emotion. A moment in musical history that changed the way we think about listening is John Cage's 433. In 1952, composer John Cage introduced perhaps one of the most controversial pieces in music history. The composition was titled 433, and during its performance, the musician played nothing, not a single note. Instead, for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, the music consisted of the ambient sounds in the concert hall. Audience members shifting in their seats, the hum of the lights, the distant murmur of the world outside. What was John Cage trying to say? Cage's experiment forced people to listen, not to structured melodies or harmonies, but to the raw, unfiltered sound of the present moment. His work challenged the idea that music is only about intentional sound. Instead, he suggested that music is happening all the time, if only we are willing to listen. The lesson: silence is never truly silent. It is full of presence, full of awareness. Think about this for a moment. What do you hear right now? The subtle hum of the room? Your own breath? Distant movement? We are always surrounded by sound, even in stillness. Cage's work was an invitation to listen, not just with our ears, but with our full attention. Cage's 433 presents a profound challenge for sound healing practitioners. Can we hold space for silence without rushing to fill it? Can we tune into the natural soundscape of a room, a body, a breath, and recognize, even in stillness, something is always happening? Now, long before Cage, composers and musicians understood that silence is what makes music come alive. They used pauses, not as empty space, but as a way to shape the emotional impact of sound. Beethoven was a master of using silence for dramatic effect. He would insert long pauses before resolving a melody, building tension and anticipation so that when the sound returned, it created greater emotional weight. One of the most famous examples is the opening of his Fifth Symphony, the iconic dun 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 dun. The silence after that fourth note is what makes the phrase so powerful. This technique forces the listener to lean in, to feel the weight of the pause before the music continues. Dun, 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 dun. Beethoven knew that silence wasn't an absence of music, it was part of the music itself. The anticipation created by a pause heightens our emotional response, making us more present with the sound when it returns. In jazz, silence is not an absence, it is part of the rhythm. Miles Davis, one of the greatest jazz musicians, famously said, "It's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play." Rests and pauses in jazz create space for improvisation. They give the music its groove, its swing, its breath. In contrast, when there is no space, when sound is constant, the music becomes overwhelming and the depth is lost. Jazz musicians intuitively understand that silence creates room for integration. It allows energy to settle. If we think of silence as a musical rest rather than a void, we can start to see how it shapes the way we experience sound. Silence is not just what happens when sound stops. It is a tool for creating meaning, emotion, and resonance. Our world is filled with constant noise, conversations, traffic, background music, so much so that silence often feels unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. But when we begin to tune into silence, we realize it has its own depth, texture, and presence. But how do we take this knowledge and truly embody it? How do we bring the art of deep listening and silence into our daily lives and healing practices? One of the simplest yet most profound practices is to just take 5 minutes a day to observe the soundscape around you. Wherever you are, pause, close your eyes, and simply listen. Notice the layers of sound. Natural sounds like wind or birds, mechanical sounds like a refrigerator hum, even your own breath. Then shift your attention to what happens in the silence between these sounds. Is there a rhythm, a subtle vibration in the stillness? The more we practice, the more we realize that silence is never empty. It is alive with awareness. Doing this type of even 5-minute listening meditation prior to a sound session can increase listening skills and sensitivity to sounds and energy in general. It can create a hypersensitivity. to what's happening in the vibrations. And here's 3 very simple ways to bring deep listening into your routine. The 60-second pause. Before playing or listening to sound, take a full minute of silence. Notice how the silence feels. Then, when the sound begins, observe how it lands differently after the pause. Tracking sound dissolution. Choose a sound, a bell, a bowl, or one strike of the gong, and follow it with your awareness until it dissolves completely into silence. Notice how long you can perceive the fading resonance. And silence before speech, before responding in a conversation. Take a brief moment of silence. This pause allows you to listen more and respond with greater clarity and intention. It also teaches us to honor the space between words. So I invite you to try one of these practices later in your day. Just as silence transforms the way we listen in daily life, it plays a key role in sound healing sessions. Sound is not just about what we play, it's about how we hold space between the sounds. One of the most powerful ways to work with silence and sound healing, again, is to allow sound to fully decay into stillness before striking again. So instead of continuously playing a gong or singing bowl, allow the vibration to rise, peak, and fade completely into silence before introducing another. Breath is another way to work with sound and silence. In many traditions, the exhale is emphasized as a way to lengthen the pause between breaths, allowing space for stillness before the next inhale. When playing sound healing instruments, try syncing your breath with the sounds, playing as you inhale and letting the exhale extend into silence before striking again. This mirrors the natural cycles of sound and silence found in nature, creating a more organic, flowing experience. Many practitioners guide their clients into states of deep relaxation using sound, but silence can be just as powerful. One technique is to invite clients to listen to the silence between tones rather than just the tones. Another approach is to guide them into noticing both external silence, so the quiet of the room, and internal silence, the stillness within their own body and mind. This practice helps develop a deeper sensitivity to subtle vibrations and enhances the healing experience. So consider how you might use intentional pauses in your own practice to enhance deep listening and healing. In music, a pause creates anticipation. It allows emotions to build. In meditation, a pause allows awareness to deepen. It becomes a doorway into stillness. In healing, a pause allows integration. It gives the body and mind time to absorb the experience. By embracing the pause, we allow deeper resonance, deeper healing, and deeper connection with ourselves and the world around us. We live in a world that rarely stops. From the moment we wake up, our minds are flooded with information, our attention divided between tasks, screens, and responsibilities. Silence is something many of us rarely experience, and stillness, true stillness, can feel almost impossible to find. Yet it is in the pause, in the spaces between sound, that we reconnect with ourselves. Stillness is not emptiness. It is where clarity arises. Silence is not absence. It is where we can hear what is truly essential. Science, nature, and cultures around the world show us sound healing, nada yoga, and meditation are not just about sound. They are about learning to listen, both to the external world and to the silence within. When we tune into the subtlety of vibration, the resonance of a single note, or the quiet between sounds, we move from distraction to deep presence. In a culture that values constant doing, the ability to simply be is revolutionary. The pause is not passive, it is the space where healing, insight, and transformation happen. And in that space, we remember who we truly are. Thank you for allowing yourself this time to truly listen.
About halfway through your presentation, I started listening for every single space between every word and every pause you did.
Perfect. You got
I
it.
think it's so cool to really go to a higher state, which is really multiple things at once. When you're tuning into multiple things at once, you go into mostly a state of theta. Well, it's actually multiple states, but it's mostly theta, and then you get very peaceful, and the whole brain starts working.
Yes.
So it's a very cool exercise to really be aware of that silence and space between. There's one thing, though, that I have a whole chapter in my book on silence and in the Complete Guide to Sound Healing. And so there's one thing I want to differentiate between because it commonly gets confused, and that's the difference between peace and silence.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you can have very uncomfortable silence, and you mentioned that,
That's right.
right? As you got me thinking about this in detail. Actually, I kind of spun off on it, and it's great, really cool,
Okay.
really cool. The it's really the the main thing I talk about is the difference between chaos ah, and anxiety and fear, chaotic vibrations versus stable, consistent, which are like the vowels and bowls and such, which is like, let me turn on original sound here. And it's more like, so it's interesting. There's silence in the world, in the outer world, which technically is the no sound, right? That's technically the definition, right? But really, the whole deal is what's going on in your whole system, physically, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually.
Right.
And that's a whole different world. And it's interesting because there's a second vibration completely different than the outer world, which is your inner world. Now, the the beautiful thing is this slow fade. Let me backtrack this way. There's a big difference between the silence in a rhythm
Right.
and a silence at the pause of a whole section. It's actually they're both silence, but really when you have a silence between notes and a rhythm, it's cool when you get hyper aware in a beautiful way to actually hear both. But it's really the rhythm that's actually doing the work, which is the silence and the note, the silence and the note. Because that, as you know, will entrain the brain into delta for sleep, theta for creativity, alpha for learning, beta for thinking, gamma for blissing out. And so that's really cool. And that's so rhythms are actually using it, but the rhythm is kind of a higher level of the actual silence itself there. But what's, I think, more important is the silence at the end. And what I've learned is when you do a slow fade, it's really profound. I've had 10,000 people in a room and no one moves after the bowl fades out after 5 minutes.
There's something magic, and you can feel the vibration, the energy still in that stillness. I think that's our chance to realize the paradox of silence, of stillness, right? That you can still feel it after the sound disappears.
Yeah.
And it's
It's
electric. Yeah, it's
it's
powerful.
really whether that silence has a stable, consistent vibration or chaos as well. I mean, I've done silent retreats where we'll play a crystal bowl and have it fade out and meditate on that stillness in the room for 4 hours.
Wow.
And I've done it with kids, 3 to 6 year olds. It's like at the end of the fade, it's like how many of you can still hear it ringing even though it's gone? And like 3/4 of the 3 to 6 year olds go,
That's great. You know what? That's great because I think as we grow up, we embrace busyness, right? We're kind of taught to be a bit in a multitasking state. So to embrace the silence is something that has, power that can really shift you rather than it being awkward silence, like you were saying,
yeah.
that it's okay. Like be in the stillness.
It's so interesting because we've done a whole program with for the kids. We have a whole curriculum for kids and what we learned from studying the books is adolescence is all about excitement and change and newness, and
Yeah.
that's like the whole deal. And what I've realized is when we can teach the kids that stillness is the most exciting thing ever because whole other worlds open up.
Yes. Yes, you have to leave room for that, right? You have to leave room to even get into your inner world or your messages, your higher self, all these things that we're all hoping to find. Yes, yeah, that's
There's one
beautiful.
there's one part you said that was really cool that I hadn't thought about. You know, even if you are not in a stable, consistent vibration in the silence, it still does its entrainment anyway. So it just, there's something about silence. I mean, it's like I live in the national park. It's a little noisy out there with all the birds. Right?
Sure.
But oh my God, it's so peaceful. I mean, if I hear an engine, it's like a boat out in the ocean, right? And it's so peaceful. And that energy, after living there for 7 years, has completely changed my energy.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and just kind of considering the soundscapes that surrounds us, not necessarily labeling something as good and bad, but just kind of noticing those sounds, those layers that are there. I think it's really great for people that do have a hard time relaxing in a sound bath or do feel uncomfortable in silence to kind of consider that. It can really be a tool to perhaps get over some of that tension that might build up when you want to rush to the next thing.
Yeah. I think what I've learned is when you lead them there slowly, like going from more activating to slowing down to more and more peaceful, and then do the long fade. Also, I've learned because I teach audio recording, I wrote the number one selling book in the world in recording. I've learned that the more bass there is and the longer the slow fade, the more the peace is.
Yes, yes. You have to allow it to integrate. You can't ru exactly, you can't rush the silence, the peace.
It's
Yeah, that's
so
a
cool.
great
I've
point.
I've done concerts with my staff where I have them actually do a slow fade at the end of every song in a concert. And then at the end, we do Pachelbel Canon, we get really activated actually. And then we do a 5 minute slow fade at the end of that for the last song. And same with sound baths. I don't move or do anything for 5 to 10 minutes. And most people have never felt such stillness in the silence ever.
I think the more you do it, the more I guess I would say crave it, right? The more you can work that muscle, more you can work that, that the more you'll enjoy it, the more you'll embrace it, and really find something extremely powerful and transformational in the experience after sound.
I've in my classes on doing sound baths, I teach people to actually go to that silence at least 3 or 4 times in the treatment or sound bath. Maybe just hold it a minute. And also, what I've realized is at the end of the silence, even if it's just a minute, the next thing you do is so highlighted and precious.
Yes, exactly.
It's like you are love.
Mm,
It's so it's so wonderful. And I really believe that peace, it's good for your immune system, but it's proven. Your immune system
right.
works way better when at peace. It's where all organs go into alignment. It's where you're the most creative, because stillness, sometimes problems make you get creative, but mostly creativity comes out of stillness. And it's a portal to other dimensions where you're one with the universe.
That's right.
It's really the best ever.
It is. It is.
You know, it's interesting because I talk about a hierarchy of vibration, which is simply music, right? Frequencies, a bunch of frequencies, which is a timbre, a harmonic structure, the musical interval relationships, and then the musical flow. And it's interesting because I see the flow as the most important part. And the flow can do two things: slowly build up to get you really activated, which is perfect if
Hmm.
you're depressed,
Right.
or slowly get really, really mellow and go to that stillness. My favorite is when you actually get to that really peaceful place, which is a slow tempo in the middle of your treatment, and then get really mellow.
Yeah.
Right?
Take
Like
it
you're,
even more. Yeah.
oh my God, I saw a concert with Wah, who's quite well known in the field. She'll do like a slow fade with a crystal bowl at the beginning and then go for an hour and a half.
Mm.
So she keeps you in that stillness of the slow fade of the silence and does really subtle energy work. Oh my God.
Nice.
Oh my
Nice.
God.
That's that space where, as a practitioner, you can have that hypersensitivity and really work with the energy of a group. And I imagine the people experiencing it are just on these beautiful journeys, they're in this, who knows where they are, just floating.
I see the peace as a smooth flow without blockages. Really, it's like da ba da ba da ba da, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, what's interesting, the most profound peace and stillness that people say they've ever experienced is when they're one with the universe. And it's really interesting. I just interviewed another person for the conference, and she did a sound bath, and she was doing some pretty busy stuff, but her energy was so still
Mm. Hmm.
that
Hmm.
I got that total stillness and silence from her energy, even though she's kind of jamming, right? But
Yeah.
her energy was so coherent, no bouncing off the walls, totally focused, 100%, and running love at the same time.
That's the key. I think that's a really good point, right? It's not just about what you're playing or not playing, it's why. Where is it coming from? and how are you expressing it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I'm because I have people do sound baths at their final project, and this one woman, she goes on the bowl, she goes uh, and hits the bowl, ding, ding. Immediately,
That's right.
I'm in the zone. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, she's so still. She can actually honor that stillness and do it that slow. I'm like, I'm totally with her.
And I think that's it. I think that the more that we can find that, embrace it, practice it, the more it's just there. So that when there are things happening externally, you're not swept up into it as much. I think that's a huge part of it.
It's true, just in your whole life. I mean, if
Mm.
you're in, and she was that type of person where she lives that energy, so she didn't really have to invoke sacred space or bring us into the zone. She just was it. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. It's interesting. There's one other thing. I just finished a book on sound and relationships, loving
Okay.
relationships. And it's interesting. There's a section in the book by Marshall on nonviolent communication that says when you're in a discussion or an argument with somebody and somebody says something, pause for 1,000 seconds
Mm.
before you respond, which is a little extra time, but
Yeah,
but,
a little bit.
but yeah, right. But you get the idea. The idea is to slow down the tempo, and just that gives you space for other energies to run. Compassion,
Yeah.
empathy, and time to actually hear them as well as prepare your own little statement. You know, listening, I've got a section in that book on listening. Oh, listening is the most complex thing in the universe. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can, if you can listen for, there's so many things. I mean, if you're listening to a voice or even music, it's like the notes, the music, the flow, the actual energy behind it, the actual intention behind it, the content of what's actually being said, and the emotional energy. I mean, it's already like 8 things
Yeah. It's a
just
lot to
to.
process. Yeah.
It's like, so to actually be able to do that, I've realized you have to be so still. I mean, it's like, and at the same time, calculating what you're going to say next in a compassionate or caring way. I mean, it's like unbelievable that we can even do it at all.
Yeah, that last part is the key, I think. A lot of times we're ahead of ourselves. The person's still trying to, get their point across, but you're already, wait, thinking about what you're going to say, so you've lost what they're saying.
It's so amazing to watch a video of a conversation with someone else. I've watched interviews, and I'm like, oh, often I'm like, holy moly, I totally missed like half of what they said. Because as an interviewer, I'm like, oh, what am I going to say next? What am I going to say next?
Hmm. Hmm.
I admit it.
It's a great practice to work on in everything that we do, though.
I love it because if so many people, as you said, and it's really probably the most important point, people are just scared to death of silence.
Yeah.
They need to feel it. And when you can be with it, oh my God, you can breathe.
Yes.
Excellent. Really excellent. Really, I think it's a really important topic.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, David. I really appreciate being able to bring it to the conference. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thank you for all you do. Until next
You
time,
as well.
take care.
Thank you.